My ex-boyfriend Nathan was the quintessential homemaker. His cooking was impeccable, and he handled all the housework. In public, he was an aloof iceberg, treating everyone with a frosty demeanor. But at home? He was my clingy, emotional little puppy. He'd be trembling with anger one moment, hurling dramatic breakup threats, only to be found drunkenly sobbing outside my door the next, begging me to hold him and never leave. My boyfriend Nathan cried at the drop of a hat. The ironic part? He was nearly 6 feet 3 inches, with broad shoulders and a solid frame. I stood in the doorway, watching him sulk in the kitchen, tears streaming down his face. I let out a long sigh. Here was the man everyone at the office knew as the cold and composed professional, now hilariously clad in a red plaid apron, standing in front of bubbling pots and simmering pans. He hadn't even changed out of his work clothes yet. His navy blazer framed his tall form, beneath it a pristine white cashmere turtleneck, the collar folded neatly below his Adam's apple. And then there was his face, a sharp jawline, glistening eyes brimming with tears, one tear precariously dangling off his nose. His damp eyelashes clumped together, making him look thoroughly pitiful, like he'd been completely wronged. I hesitated before shuffling over to hug his waist. He brushed my hands off. I tried again, hugging him tighter this time. He pushed me away once more. I let out a dramatic groan and latched onto him for the third time, my face pressed against his back. This time, his push was so soft it was more like a tender caress. Though Nathan cried easily, he wasn't hard to appease. When he spoke, his voice still carried traces of his earlier sniffles. "Can you be serious for once? Can you please take me seriously?" His voice cracked, his frustration seeping through as he continued. "Didn't I tell you this morning that breakfast was on the table? And that I packed your lunch? But you never listen. Last night, you stayed up late writing your manuscript. Then today, you slept until noon and went straight back to work. And now," he checked the clock. "It's already 8 p.m., and you're just now having your first meal of the day. This lifestyle is so unhealthy. I called you for dinner earlier, but you complained I was nagging you, too busy glued to your computer to even look at me." His voice faltered as he choked on a sob, letting out a small hiccup that made his broad back shudder under my grip. Clinging to him like a koala, I buried my face into his back and mumbled an apology. "Baby, don't be mad, okay? I'm sorry. My editor was rushing me for the draft, so I didn't have time to eat. I promise I'll eat on time from now on, alright? Don't cry anymore." I wriggled my way under his raised arm, fully pressing myself into his chest. Cupping his tear-streaked face in my hands, I wiped his cheeks and cooed. "Baby, don't cry. Seeing you cry breaks my heart." He turned his face away, ignoring me. The pot behind him began to boil over. With a huff, he yanked off the lid and angrily tossed a handful of spaghetti into the water, as if taking his frustration out on the pasta. I peeked over his shoulder into the pot, where the lonely strands of spaghetti swirled aimlessly. Nudging his side, I said sweetly, "I feel like having spaghetti with tomato meat sauce." He didn't respond. But when dinner was finally served, the plate held not only a generous helping of tomato meat sauce, but also a side of my favorite fried shrimp. The consequence of not eating all day and then wolfing down a massive plate of pasta? My stomach went on strike. By the middle of the night, I was jolted awake by sharp, stabbing pain radiating from my stomach. It felt like a red-hot iron needle was repeatedly piercing through me, leaving me drenched in cold sweat within minutes. The clock on the bedside table read 3 a.m. I struggled to sit up, the movement waking Nathan. He propped himself up on one arm and quickly turned on the bedside lamp, his voice heavy with concern. "Your stomach's acting up again?" Curled up in pain, I barely managed to nod. Nathan swung into action immediately. Down from the bed, lights on, meds fetched, water poured. He carefully helped me swallow the pills, then climbed back into bed. Gently, he pulled me into his lap, wrapping his long limbs around me, and began to massage my aching stomach with light, rhythmic motions. The pain gradually dulled, no longer as sharp as before. His chest pressed against my back, and I could hear his steady, reassuring heartbeat. Suddenly, a cool sensation trailed down my neck, 2 warm teardrops rolled down to my shoulder blades. I turned to look at him, but Nathan buried his face into the curve of my neck, trembling as soft sobs racked his body. He refused to let me see his face, hiding himself in my shoulder. Determined, I twisted around and wrapped my arms around his neck. Instead of using my hands, I leaned in and brushed my lips against his tear-streaked cheek, tasting the saltiness of his tears. His tears flowed even harder, wetting strands of his hair, which stuck haphazardly to his damp forehead. "Why are you crying again, little crybaby?" I teased gently. "It's my stomach that hurts, not yours." "I'm not even crying, so why are you?" Even in the depths of his sadness, even as tears streamed down his face, Nathan didn't stop massaging my stomach. His warmth seeped into me, from his hands, his chest, and even his tears. The steady heat eased my pain little by little. "Let's kiss, okay?" I whispered, seeking out his lips. Our kiss was tender, slow. His tears still clung to his face as he furrowed his brows, shutting his eyes and letting me soothe him. His sniffles of sorrow gradually transformed into soft sighs of contentment. Beneath the blanket, we created a small, cocooned world, one untouched by pain. Our heartbeats blended, melting together like scoops of ice cream pressed close. "When you're sick, I hurt too," Nathan murmured, his voice quivering with emotion. He took my hand and placed it over his chest. "It hurts here." The next day, Nathan took the day off from work and brought me to see a well-known doctor. After reviewing my test results, the doctor explained that my stomach spasms were a common issue caused by my erratic lifestyle and irregular eating habits. He handed us a lengthy prescription list and sternly reminded me to eat my meals on time. Throughout the entire appointment, Nathan was more anxious than I was. Every word the doctor said, he dutifully typed into his phone's notes app. The usually proud and confident man, fluent, sharp, and charming in high-powered business settings, sat meekly under the doctor's lecture, nodding at every admonishment, not daring to protest even once. On the drive home, it was rush hour. The highway was packed with cars, inching forward in stop-and-go traffic. The golden hues of dusk blended seamlessly into the encroaching twilight, while soft jazz music played faintly in the background. Nathan, clearly in his element under the mood of the music, began his relentless campaign of nagging me. "Make sure to eat breakfast every morning. The cereal is in the third cupboard in the kitchen. I'll wash the fruit and leave it on the table for you. Don't forget. From now on, I'll remind you to eat every meal." His long, slender fingers intertwined with mine, holding my hand firmly as he spoke. His lips, perfectly shaped and endlessly distracting, moved as he continued. "After you submit this novel, take some time to rest. Don't rush into writing the next one right away. Focus on fixing your schedule and taking care of your health. No late-night dinners with friends either, stay home. When I get back, I'll cook for you. How about creamy mushroom soup tonight?" I stared at him, lost in thought. When he realized I wasn't responding, he pouted like a child, giving my palm a gentle squeeze. "Why don't you ever answer me? Do you not love me anymore?" I could see he was waiting for me to hurriedly deny his accusation and tell him, "I love you." When I remained silent, his expression grew even more pitiful. He straightened his posture, speaking as if either consoling himself or convincing me. "No matter. It's fine. I've always been good at comforting others. After my parents divorced and started new families, I was left to live with my grandmother, completely on my own. If I hadn't learned how to please people, keep my head down, and mask my true feelings, I wouldn't have survived those years or made it to adulthood. I'd been through enough cold stares, sharp words, and the feeling of being treated like an unwanted burden passed from one person to the next. The first lesson life taught me was how to placate others, how to sidestep conflict, and how to wear a mask. Through tireless effort, I managed to get into NYU for graduate school, all while juggling part-time jobs to support myself. At my busiest, I'd intern at a company during the day, tutor in the evenings, and work as a server in the dead of night. In those frantic days, eating regularly became a luxury. I skipped meals to save both time and money, pushing through hunger to make it all work. And then, as if life had decided to throw me a lifeline, I met Nathan. We first crossed paths at a friend's party. That very night, he went around the room asking for my contact information. He was an only child from a middle-class family and had never known the struggle of lacking money. Smart and capable, he held both a bachelor's and master's degree in finance from a top-tier university and interned at a prestigious financial firm. Even as an intern, the taxes on his monthly paycheck exceeded my entire salary. Nathan was always cold and distant, exuding an aura of detachment. On our first date, his tall and commanding figure loomed next to me, his sharp features set in a stoic expression. His tightly pressed lips and guarded demeanor made it clear he kept the world at arm's length. But when his gaze landed on me, it softened instantly, becoming molten and warm. Years of scraping by had sharpened my instincts. I immediately recognized the signal: this man likes me. He liked me unconditionally. From the very first glance, he liked me enough to set aside his pride, endure his friends' teasing, and persist until he had my contact information. He liked me so much that he approached me with cautious reverence, ensuring he never crossed any boundaries. It wasn't until 6 months into dating that he finally worked up the courage to stammer. "I can cook. I'm good at housework. Your apartment is so far from your workplace. So, would you consider moving in with me?" His ears flushed red first, the color creeping across his skin until his entire face was suffused with a rosy blush. He looked like he might combust from the sheer intensity of his nerves. Falling for his handsome face did me no favors, but curled up together on his ridiculously plush couch, I couldn't resist the pull. When I opened my arms to him, he immediately nestled into my embrace, clinging to me. His eyes seemed to ensnare me, drawing me in, while his soft hair brushed against my fingers like the fur of a cuddly cat begging for affection. Lifting his face gently, I leaned in and captured his lips. The moment our skin touched, his warmth seeped into me, intoxicating and overwhelming. Holding him was like cradling a giant, affectionate lion, sprawled out and purring, belly up, waiting for my touch. I said yes to moving in with him. Nathan took care of me like no one else ever had. When he saw me returning from a late-night tutoring session, dozing off on the bus with my head nodding forward until it thudded against the window, he'd rub the sore spot on my forehead with such tenderness before pulling me into his arms, letting me drift off against his chest. When he caught me falling asleep at my desk after endless nights of typing away to meet my editor's deadlines, he'd carefully scoop me up, tuck me into bed, and drape a blanket over me with meticulous care. When my writing finally received positive feedback from my editor, and I hesitantly considered transitioning to being a full-time author, he was the first to stand up and cheer for me. "Congratulations. I support you," he'd said with a proud smile. How could I not love someone like him? And to top it all off, he was so adorably vulnerable. He cried. And I adored him for it. Nathan was usually the epitome of composure, yet in private, he could unravel in the most disarming ways. There he was, his deep, husky voice murmuring my name with heartfelt intensity, while soft, muffled sobs escaped him. His tears soaked the skin of my back, leaving it damp and warm. His face was tender and flushed, his tear-brightened eyes glistening like gemstones. But his movements remained firm and unyielding, his powerful arms locked around my waist, leaving me breathless and gripping his biceps for support. "Do you love me?" he asked, his voice trembling, still thick with tears. His reddened eyes stayed fixed on mine as he held me close, refusing to loosen his hold. Even through his soft sniffles, he pressed. "Baby, do you love me?" At that moment, I coaxed him with soothing words. "I love you. I love you more than anything." It was only then that he finally released his bitten lip, his face blossoming into an adorable blush of shyness and relief. He was too cute for words. But life wasn't all passion and romance. Living together for a long time eventually brought its share of challenges, messy, mundane ones. Our main source of conflict was my constant stomach issues and my chaotic lifestyle. Nathan couldn't stand seeing me in pain. He'd spend sleepless nights tossing and turning, worrying over me while I stayed up late working. His frustration finally boiled over into arguments. Well, arguments might be too strong a word. Mostly, it was Nathan endlessly nagging me, while I couldn't stay mad at him. He was just too handsome. So, I'd sit there, listening to his lectures like a scolded child. And that only made him angrier. "You're always like this. You never respond to anything I say," he snapped, tossing the dish towel into the sink. His voice rose slightly, trembling with a mix of irritation and hurt. The moment I saw his expression turn wounded, I didn't hesitate. I leapt onto him, arms wrapping around his neck. He caught me effortlessly, holding me securely. "I don't respond because I don't want to argue with you," I said, nuzzling into him. "Honestly, it's because you're too good-looking. You're so ridiculously handsome that I just can't stay mad at you." Nathan went quiet for a long moment. Then, with an awkward stiffness, he muttered, "Then close your eyes. Don't look at my face while we're talking." We both froze at the absurdity of his suggestion, then burst into laughter at the same time. "Baby, don't ignore me," he murmured, burying his face in the crook of my neck and inhaling deeply. One hand supported my lower back while the other cupped beneath me, lifting me high off the ground as if I weighed nothing. "No matter what happens, don't ignore me," he sighed deeply, his voice muffled as he pressed his face into my shoulder. "If you ignore me, I'll lose my mind." As I stroked his hair, I thought to myself, I don't know about losing his mind, but crying himself to the brink of exhaustion? Now that's guaranteed. After returning home from the hospital, my grandmother called to check in. "Did the doctor see you? What did they say?" I relayed the doctor's instructions to her honestly. On the other end of the line, my grandmother let out a long sigh. "I've told you before, you need to listen to Nathan more. If he tells you to do something, just do it. Stop making him worry all the time." Her words made me pout in protest. "Grandma, this is so unfair. Am I even your biological granddaughter? Or is Nathan your actual grandchild? You're so biased, it's not even funny." Hearing my mock complaint, she chuckled. "Only Nathan can keep you in line." After hanging up, my phone buzzed with a series of messages. It was from Nathan's good friend, Daniel. "Olivia, are you there? Nathan's not answering his phone, and I can't reach him. I have something urgent, are you two together right now?" I replied quickly and set my phone down, calling out for Nathan. He poked his head out from the balcony, wearing rubber gloves and holding a soaking wet, pink bra with a butterfly bow. There was no doubt in my mind that the rest of my lingerie was currently soaking in the basin as well. "Daniel's looking for you. Where's your phone? It should be on the dining table. Honey, can you grab it for me?" Sure enough, his phone was ringing on the table. I picked it up and held it to his ear. While he continued scrubbing clothes, he took the call. As the conversation went on, his brow furrowed deeper, and the pace of his hands slowed. Holding the phone for him, I grew bored and started to play with his earlobe and the collar of his shirt. Leaning closer, I caught a faint whiff of his scent. Curious, I leaned in further and sniffed. It wasn't from his body wash, shampoo, or detergent. It was something more subtle, something emanating from his skin itself, filling the space around him with a quiet comfort. It was a scent that calmed me, reassured me, and drew me in. What was that smell? Determined to figure it out, I leaned even closer and took a deep breath. The phone call went quiet above me. After a long pause, Nathan's deep, husky voice finally broke the silence. "Okay. Got it. I'll be there soon." The next moment, he pulled me into his arms. At some point, he had taken off his gloves, which now sat neatly on the edge of the sink, dripping water onto the floor. Before I could react, he tilted my chin up and pressed his lips to mine. He kissed me messily, urgently, as if trying to consume every ounce of my breath. Then he wrapped me in a tight embrace, burying me against his chest as he cradled me like I was something precious and fragile. Mine, his voice seemed to say without words, as he held me close, his strength gentle yet possessive. He pressed his cheek against mine, his voice low and teasing. "Why are you sniffing me? Were you upset that I didn't pay attention to you while I was on the phone?" I couldn't help but laugh. I was astounded by his shamelessness. "It's just, you smell really nice, so I wanted to sniff you a little," I said with a playful grin. "Really?" He raised an eyebrow, his tone laced with amusement. "You couldn't figure out the scent after all that sniffing? That rules out any of our regular soaps or shampoos. I didn't put on cologne today either. And yet, you find it so attractive." According to scientific studies, women are often drawn to their partner's pheromones, perceiving them as a unique body scent. This scent triggers the respiratory center, speeding up breathing, which in turn excites the body and floods the system with dopamine, causing specific neural impulses. He leaned in and planted a loud, lingering kiss on my lips before continuing. "Unfortunately, baby, my boss needs me. There's an issue with one of the model factors that I have to fix." He cupped my cheek apologetically. "I'll be back tonight, okay? We can pick this up later, I promise I'll make it worth your while." His lips brushed against mine again, soft and reassuring. "I've already made dinner. It's in the oven, just heat it for 20 minutes, and it'll be ready to eat. Wait for me to come home, alright?" Wait for me. That night, Nathan didn't make it back until the early hours of the morning. It started with work delays, he needed to recalculate some numbers urgently, and the team ended up staying late. Then his boss decided they should have drinks to unwind. Nathan kept me updated with texts, complaining about the late hours and wishing he were home instead. "I don't want to work tonight," he texted, followed by a crying emoji. "I just want to be at home, cuddling you." I set my phone aside and burrowed under the blankets, rolling around the bed a couple of times. For someone who insisted on sharing a tiny corner of our king-sized bed, our hands clasped, legs tangled, and his body wrapped snugly around mine, Nathan wasn't here tonight. The bed felt spacious, almost too empty. Finally, I stretched out my limbs and drifted off to sleep, savoring the rare moment of freedom. But then I was nudged awake. A warm body pressed tightly against my back, and I groggily realized I'd somehow ended up on the very edge of the bed. I shifted slightly, only to find myself trapped between the bed's edge and the solid heat of Nathan's embrace. His hands roamed over my limbs, kneading gently, while his lips trailed soft kisses along my spine. "Stop it," I mumbled sleepily. "I'm trying to sleep." Instead of stopping, he clung to me tighter, the faint scent of alcohol lingering on his breath. "I'm sleeping too," he murmured, his tone petulant. "But I want to sleep while hugging you. Turn around and hold me, please." I sighed and turned to face him, hoping he'd finally settle down. For a moment, he stayed still, basking in the warmth of my arms. Then, just as I started to relax, his hands started wandering again. "Enough," I said, pushing his head away, gently. His reaction was immediate, his brows furrowed, his lips puckered in a dramatic pout, and his entire face radiated exaggerated hurt. Before I could respond further, tears welled up in his eyes and spilled over, rolling down his flushed cheeks. He froze, unwilling to move away, but his upturned face looked heartbreakingly distraught, his red-rimmed eyes brimming with sadness. "You pushed me," he whispered, his voice quivering. "Don't you want me anymore?" I quickly pulled him back into my arms, stroking his hair soothingly. "I'm sorry, baby. I didn't mean to push you. I shouldn't have done that." "Then don't push me away again," he pleaded, his voice tight with emotion. "Just hold me. Don't let me go." All right, I said softly, leaning in to kiss his forehead. "There, I kissed you. Can you forgive me now?" He looked at me with teary eyes, inching closer like a little caterpillar, then sniffled and whispered near my ear. "Fine, I'm not upset anymore. A beat later, his voice turned low and suggestive. You know, they say sex feels different after drinking. His puppy dog eyes still glistened with lingering tears, but his hands were already making their way across my skin. With his well-defined muscles shifting like a series of rolling hills, and that tear-streaked, handsome face, there was no way I could say no. The next morning, he was already bustling around in the kitchen by the time I woke up. Barefoot, I padded over to hug him from behind. After a moment, I stepped onto the bathroom scale and casually checked my weight. His eyes darted to the number, and his expression darkened. Oh no. You've lost another 3 pounds. Nathan seemed to have a peculiar obsession with my weight, as if he carried the blame for every ounce I shed after we started dating. You're too thin. You need to eat more, he'd say over and over, worry etched into every word. He'd often get upset when I skipped meals. At that time, I had just quit my job to pursue full-time writing. The uncertainty of a job that didn't immediately yield income left me riddled with anxiety, a lingering remnant of my lifelong fear of financial instability. During those nerve-wracking periods of drafting and awaiting my editor's feedback, I could barely eat. Everything tasted like ash, and my weight plummeted rapidly. Nathan, desperate to help, couldn't sleep at night. Every day after work, he'd dive straight into the kitchen, tirelessly experimenting with new recipes to coax me into eating. But no matter what he made, I couldn't stomach it. The frustration brought him to tears, hot, glimmering drops rolling down his cheeks like a broken string of pearls. The worst fight we ever had happened during one of my more intense writing spells. I was in the zone, typing furiously, trying to seize a rare wave of inspiration. Nathan, meanwhile, was in the background, nagging me to eat something. Finally, at a critical moment, his persistent chatter snapped my focus. Enough! I yelled, slamming my hands on the desk. I'll eat when I'm hungry. Stop forcing me and just shut up already. He froze, a 6'1" giant standing helplessly in the middle of the living room, stunned by my sudden outburst. I sat back down, trying to salvage the fleeting flow of my thoughts. But the rhythm was gone, the delicate threads of my creativity unraveling into a frustrating tangle. I typed a few more words, but they led nowhere. Letting out a long, frustrated sigh, I grabbed my bag, hastily stuffed in my laptop, charger, and phone, zipped it shut, and headed toward the door. He finally moved. Where are you going? Don't worry about it, I snapped without turning around. I could feel his eyes on my back, but before he could say anything else, the door slammed shut between us. For a brief moment, I hesitated in the hallway. Then, steeling myself, I walked away. I went to a coffee shop in a part of town far from home, deliberately heading in the opposite direction. As soon as I left, I hailed a cab and disappeared. By the time I finished my draft, it was already late at night. I turned my phone back on, it had been off since I arrived, and almost immediately, it started ringing incessantly. Scanning through my notifications, I saw over 100 missed calls and countless text messages, all from Nathan. I opened the messages. Every single one was filled with worry. Nathan asked where I was, if I was still upset, when I'd come home, and if he should come pick me up. He asked if I'd eaten, whether I'd finished my draft, and repeatedly apologized for disturbing me. He admitted he felt guilty and regretted everything, begging me not to stay mad at him. One message said the house felt unbearably empty, and he'd been restless all afternoon, unable to focus on anything. He was consumed with fear, wondering if I was okay, if I was safe. The last message pleaded, I just need to see you, even for a moment. Please don't ignore me. At least let me know you're all right. In addition to Nathan's messages, there was also an invitation from Lily, my best friend from college, asking me to join her for dinner. After some hesitation, I accepted Lily's invitation. Opening Nathan's chat, I typed and deleted several drafts of a response. Before I could decide, more notifications from him popped up. Did you finish your novel? Where are you? I'll come pick you up. Finally, I replied, I'm having dinner with Lily tonight. I won't be coming home. His response was instant. Where are you eating? Can I join you? I hesitated before replying, no, I don't want to see you right now. After a brief pause, he sent another message. Then where are you? I can pick you up after dinner. No need. I'll take a cab home, I replied curtly. I packed my things and headed to meet Lily. She had chosen a lively little bar on a bustling street. The place was packed, but we managed to find a quiet corner to sit in. What do you want to drink? Lily asked, scanning the menu. I glanced at the menu and ordered 2 beers. Before long, a server brought over our drinks along with a basket of golden, crispy fries. We clinked glasses and each took a long sip of beer. The cool liquid slid down easily, and we both let out a synchronized sigh. Nathan was still texting me. I glanced at my phone, then turned it face down on the table. Lily chuckled softly. Did you have a fight with Nathan? I nodded, then shook my head. Not exactly. She gave me a knowing look but didn't press further. Instead, she shifted the conversation to herself. I'm having some issues with my boyfriend too, she said. Her boyfriend was someone I knew from a previous double date. He was still in college, while Lily had already started her career. Despite the 3-year age gap, her boyfriend carried himself with a maturity that often made their roles seem reversed. He always took care of her, and when he looked at her, his eyes brimmed with unspoken affection. As I listened to Lily talk about their recent disagreements, I found myself reflecting on Nathan. For all his crying and insecurities, his love for me was undeniable, overwhelming even. And yet, here I was, sitting in a bar, unsure of how to respond to the man who had spent the entire day worrying about me. You managed to fight with him? I asked Lily, my eyes wide in disbelief. Yes, she said, chuckling softly. Though, like you, it wasn't really a fight, just a bit of sulking and miscommunication. She sighed and continued, I keep thinking he's so young, surrounded by girls his age with whom he probably shares more in common. Meanwhile, I'm older. I don't even know how to feel about it. It hurts to think that maybe being with me is just him settling, that he might be better off with someone more lively, someone younger. I thought for a moment, then replied firmly, but he chose you. He's here with you, Lily. That means you're enough for him, more than enough. Whether a relationship works or not isn't up to just one person, it's something both people decide together. So stop overthinking it, okay? Lily picked up a fry, chewing slowly as she asked, and what about you? What are you afraid of? Her question caught me off guard. For someone who usually can't stop talking about Nathan, you've been sitting here, all quiet and preoccupied, for half an hour. Did something happen between you two? I took a long sip of beer, the bitterness lingering on my tongue as I forced a wry smile. It's not a big deal, I admitted. Honestly, my anger already faded hours ago. I know his nagging comes from a place of care and love. I'm not mad at him. I'm just scared. I grew up in a broken home, a child of divorce who learned independence early. Whenever I faced challenges or pain, I dealt with them alone, hiding away to lick my wounds in private. Like a hedgehog, I bristled with sharp quills, projecting strength even when I felt small and vulnerable. Humor, charm, and deflection became my armor. But Nathan had been steadily, persistently working to strip away that armor. And he was succeeding. I was no longer the invincible, self-reliant version of myself. With him, I'd started to have weaknesses, letting myself get upset, losing control of my temper. To me, that wasn't progress. It was a dangerous shift. I wasn't mad at Nathan, I was mad at myself. Not because I doubted his love, but because I doubted my ability to hold on to it. What if I couldn't keep him? What if letting him in meant losing my independence, my ability to stand on my own? Lily clinked her glass against mine, her gaze steady. You're scared because his love is so heavy, so overwhelming, aren't you? Why not try opening your heart just a little bit more? Trust him. Rely on him. Tell him what you're afraid of. I think that would work out a lot better than running away. The guilt that had been gnawing at me since this afternoon was now crushing me, leaving me restless and fidgety. Seeing my unease, Lily waved me off with a warm smile. Go. Talk to Nathan. Clear the air. I'll stick around here for a bit before heading home. I nodded, grateful. Be safe, okay? I gave Lily a grateful glance, grabbed my bag, and left in a rush. I wanted to see him. I wanted to hug him, kiss him, and tell him I was sorry. The moment I got out of the cab, I sprinted all the way home, my heart pounding harder with every step. When I reached the door, I fumbled with the key, pushed it open, and was met with darkness. The house was eerily quiet, save for the faint glow of a cigarette ember in the living room. Gasping for breath, I groped for the light switch and flipped it on. The room flooded with brightness, and there he was, Nathan. Sitting on the couch, a cigarette loosely hanging between his fingers, his expression shadowed and unreadable. He didn't look at me at first, but when he did, his gaze was sharp, cutting through the air like a blade. I dropped my bag carelessly onto the floor and rushed to him, reaching for his hand. Nathan, listen to me. He let me hold his hand but didn't squeeze back like he usually would. His voice was low and restrained. You've been drinking? Yes, but that's not the point. Nathan, I'm so sorry. He cut me off. His eyes, rimmed red, reflected a mix of exhaustion and frustration. His words came out clipped, almost trembling with suppressed emotion. Do you have any idea how worried I was about you? I messaged you, called you, nothing. Do you even care about how that made me feel? Or are you just sick of me checking in on you every day? Nathan, no. He interrupted again, this time louder, his tone laced with raw emotion. We agreed, didn't we? No more shutting each other out. No more leaving without saying a word. And yet today, you made me sit here all day, trapped in this house, waiting and hoping you'd come home. Do you ever stop to think about how I feel? He pinched the bridge of his nose, closing his eyes as though trying to regain composure. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, but every word struck like a dagger. I don't know what you want, Olivia. I really don't. But maybe we need some space to figure things out. It felt like a dream, an awful, surreal dream, as I watched him pack a few essentials into his bag and sling it over his shoulder. I wanted to ask him where he was going so late at night. I wanted to ask if he thought I was beyond saving, beyond loving. I wanted to beg him to stay, to tell him I was sorry, but no words came out. My lips parted and closed, trembling with unspoken pleas, but my voice stayed trapped inside me. The door closed behind him with a soft yet deafening click. And then I was alone. For a long time I sat motionless on the couch, staring blankly at the door he had just walked out of. Finally, I forced myself to get up, stumbling through the motions of washing up and preparing for bed. Every corner of the house screamed of him. The neatly arranged kitchen tools, the freshly washed and hung laundry on the balcony, the ergonomic laptop stand he had set up in the study, and the meticulously labeled fruit containers in the fridge. I picked up my phone and opened our chat. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, typing and deleting messages over and over again. In the end, I sent nothing. Maybe it was for the best. Being with someone like me must be exhausting. Reality isn't full of dramatic life and death moments or earth-shattering revelations. Most couples don't fall apart because of grand betrayals, they unravel in the day-to-day grind of tiny, relentless frustrations. I guess we're no different. Just another pair of people whose love got worn down by the mundane. When Lily heard about what had happened, she fell completely silent. We were still sitting in the same corner of the little tavern, sipping on the same beers. After a long while, she pulled out her phone, opened a travel booking site, and asked, "What's your passport number?" I rattled it off, and a few minutes later, she forwarded me a text. It was a flight to Malibu, scheduled for the next morning, which was just hours away. She made the final call, "Let's each head home, pack up, and leave tomorrow. I've already taken time off work. You just finished your draft." It's the perfect time for a trip to unwind and clear your head. So we hastily packed our things and flew to Malibu's sun-soaked beaches. There, we wandered along the shore, chatted endlessly, learned to surf, snorkeled, indulged in spa treatments, and spent our nights lying on the sand, counting stars. The stars were dazzling, so many of them, scattered across the vast sky like diamonds. Almost instinctively, my eyes sought out the brightest one. I couldn't help but recall a night with Nathan when he eagerly held me close, teaching me how to stargaze. He had pointed out Cygnus 61, explaining how it was a binary star system whose components revolved around each other due to mutual gravitational pull. They protect and accompany each other, he had said, his voice warm and certain. Just like I'll always protect you. I had leaned lazily into his embrace, playfully pinching his nose. Staring into his kind, handsome face, I'd asked, "Why do you like me?" He'd taken the question seriously, pausing to think before answering slowly, "I like you because you're worth liking. But honestly, I don't know the exact reason. It's like asking why the sky is blue, why there are 4 seasons, or who decided there should be 4 at all. Why do fish swim instead of walk on land? Why do humans live on the ground instead of the sea? I just love you. I know it's you, and it has to be you. No one else could ever replace you." He'd scrunched his nose, clearly satisfied with his explanation. And now, I'd lost someone who loved me so much. Still thinking about him? Lily's voice dragged me back to the present. Yes, I admitted with a pang of despair. I still miss him. I miss him so much. He must be so disappointed in me. Lily grabbed my hand and squeezed it tightly. Then go win him back. Show him you've changed. And so, with newfound determination, we left our beach getaway and returned to the city under the cover of night. When I stepped back into my empty apartment, I flicked on the lights, revealing a quiet, lonely space. I hadn't even unpacked my suitcase when a sudden knock at the door startled me. Peering through the peephole, my breath caught. There he was. Nathan. He was crouched on the ground, his head buried in his knees, sobbing as if the weight of the world was crushing him. My love, my dearest love. His head was drenched with the sweat of his tears, damp strands of hair clinging to his face, mingling with the salty trails streaming down his cheeks. I stood frozen at the door, my hand gripping the doorknob, unable to process what I was seeing. When I didn't respond, he burst into uncontrollable sobs, his voice trembling as he pleaded, "Don't leave me, baby, please don't leave me again." The moment I opened the door, he surged inside like a wild beast, instantly seeking my lips, pulling my hands to his waist. Tears streaming down his face, he begged, "Hold me, please." The same man who had stormed out of my life a week ago now clung to me like I was his only anchor, refusing to let go. As soon as the door clicked shut, he spun around and pinned me against it with a fierce intensity. He didn't release me until I felt the sting on my swollen lips, his unrelenting passion leaving its mark. This was the same person who had vanished without a trace, only to return in the dead of night crying outside my door, and now, after his tears, he had become feral, his kiss wild and unrestrained. I had prepared myself to be gentle, to coax him back with soft words and reconciliation. But the moment I saw him, every bit of frustration and hurt I'd buried deep inside came rushing to the surface. He bent down to nuzzle me, this towering figure of a man suddenly vulnerable, trying desperately to fold himself into my embrace. He rubbed his face against my shoulder like a wounded animal, his trembling voice breaking as he whispered my name over and over. I pushed at his shoulders, but he looked at me with wide, disbelieving eyes. The next second, he collapsed into sobs, tears and snot streaking his face as he clung to me with all 4 limbs. I let out a startled yelp, staggering backward under his weight. It took several steps before I managed to steady myself. "Why did you push me away? Why are you pushing me away? Do you not want me anymore?" He sniffled, his voice cracking as he brought my hand to his lips and kissed it. His eyes, wet and pitiful, searched mine as he whispered, "Hug me, please." The heavy scent of alcohol clung to him. Knowing there was no reasoning with a drunk, I tried to coax him into bed. "Be good. Let's sleep for now, okay? You're drunk. We'll talk in the morning when you're sober. He tightened his grip around me, burying his face into my neck. No, I won't let go. I left for 2 days, and when I came back, you were gone. I looked everywhere for you, and you were nowhere to be found. He let out a loud, heart-wrenching sob, pressing his tear-streaked face against mine. His cheeks were burning, the heat radiating through his tears as though it might melt me. I whispered soothingly, "How about this? I'll go with you to the bed." "Will you go then?" Finally, he quieted down, his sniffles softening as he gazed at me through blurry, tear-filled eyes. I took his hand and led him to the bedroom. He sat obediently on the edge of the bed, holding out his arms so I could help him take off his jacket. As I turned to hang the jacket in the closet, he caught my wrist. I held up the jacket with a reassuring smile. "Don't worry, I'm not leaving. I'm just putting this away." He didn't say a word. Instead, he yanked the jacket from my hands and tossed it onto the floor. As soon as my hands were free, he intertwined his fingers with mine, holding my hand tightly. He blinked at me, pulling me toward him until I was enveloped in his embrace. The combined weight of our bodies caused the bed frame to creak in protest, but I let myself surrender to the moment. Sigh. Fine. We'd talk everything out tomorrow. The next morning, I woke up to find Nathan sitting on the edge of the bed. His muscular arms extended beneath the covers, his fingers still laced with mine. The moment I stirred, his whole body went rigid. Though his face remained stubbornly turned away, the grip on my hand tightened. I slowly sat up, trying to slip my hand free. "Awake now?" His jaw clenched. "Aren't you the one who wanted to break up? Who stormed off and left me behind, ignoring me?" Like a wounded animal, he bared his teeth slightly, his red-rimmed eyes glistening with unshed tears. His entire body trembled with frustration. "Break up? Who said anything about breaking up?" "You said we should cool off," I replied cautiously. "And cooling off suddenly means breaking up," he yelled, his voice trembling with indignation. "Fine. Let's say we did break up. Eva, you're too much. You go around saying you love me, but your heart is colder than steel. I say we need a break, and you don't even try to stop me? I say we need space, and you immediately book a flight to who knows where? I just wanted you to try to comfort me. I feel like your dog, always at your beck and call. You flash me a smile, and I'd do anything for you. But when you don't take care of yourself, it tears me apart." His voice cracked as he bit out the words through clenched teeth. "I thought you'd left me forever. You didn't tell me you were going, and you didn't tell me you were coming back. If I hadn't been camping out by your apartment every day, would I have even known you were home?" His anger lasted barely 2 seconds, before his eyes brimmed with tears again. "Why do you always treat me like this? You're always picking on me. You love seeing me cry and watching me humiliate myself. Does it make you happy? You don't really love me, all you ever do is bully me." My heart ached at the sight of him, and I quickly pulled him into a hug, stroking his back. "I wasn't trying to avoid you, I was just afraid you'd had enough of me, that I was being too much for you." "Eva," he said, his voice low and unsteady, "you've never truly believed in my love for you. I know you're scared of being abandoned, but my love for you isn't just empty words. Without you, it's like my heart doesn't even beat. I can't do anything, my mind and soul are consumed by you." His gaze locked onto mine, fierce and unwavering. "I love you. That has never been a joke." From that moment on, I stopped saying "I love you" as casually as I had before. His love was heavy, too earnest, too consuming. If I couldn't respond with the same level of sincerity, it wouldn't be fair to him. After watching me step off the scale, Nathan hurried off to the kitchen, busying himself with new recipes. My phone rang, it was my editor. My novel had passed the initial review, and they wanted to set up a meeting to discuss it further. The editor went on to say that a production company was highly interested in my novel. They wanted to meet to discuss the detailed outline and potential plans for adapting it into a film or series. As the editor spoke, Nathan's voice floated over from behind me. He called me baby in that soft, velvety tone that could make anyone's ears go red. The editor paused mid-sentence, then cleared his throat awkwardly. After hastily arranging the time, place, and documents I needed to bring to the meeting, he wrapped up with a quick, "I'm sorry for interrupting," before abruptly hanging up. I sighed and turned to face the culprit. Nathan acted as though nothing had happened, casually offering me a spoonful of the creamy soup he'd just made. I obediently sipped 2 spoonfuls, before dodging the third. He didn't force me to drink more. Instead, he urged me to get dressed, saying he'd drop me off at the meeting before heading to work. In my bag by the door, he had already packed a water bottle and a chocolate bar. On the coat rack, he had neatly hung the thick jacket I'd need for the chilly weather. When we arrived at the meeting spot, I was about to get out of the car when he grabbed my hand and leaned in for a lingering kiss. "That's enough. My lipstick is ruined," I protested, turning my face away. "But I'll miss you." "We won't see each other for hours," he murmured, his low voice brimming with reluctance. "Let me kiss you a little longer. I'll buy you more lipstick." After a good amount of coaxing and nuzzling, he finally let me go, watching me walk away with a clingy, lovesick gaze. Just before entering the cafe, I turned back for one last look. Nathan had already rolled up the car window and restarted the engine, instantly transforming back into a cold and composed professional. He was now fully immersed in his job, becoming even more reserved and stoic in public. His reputation as an iceberg was spreading, his demeanor intimidating and unyielding from years of high-pressure calculations. No one would have guessed that at home, this so-called iceberg was nothing more than an over-the-top, shamelessly affectionate crybaby. And ever since he realized that his tears could move me far more effectively than his words, and discovered I was a pushover for his soft approach, he'd fully embraced his role as a crying, clingy drama king. He cried often, and I was utterly helpless against it. Every time he teared up, I'd become flustered and cave completely, signing off on whatever unfair terms he wanted. That evening, back at home, we curled up on the couch to watch TV. My sitting posture was anything but proper. I twisted, turned, and finally decided to sprawl out comfortably across his lap, scrolling on my phone. His warmth seeped into me as I rested against him. My hand absent-mindedly wandered to his stomach, and I couldn't help noticing it felt a bit softer than usual. I gave his belly a playful pinch. "Have you gained weight?" He tensed up immediately. "No, I haven't." I absent-mindedly responded with a nonchalant hum and went back to scrolling through my phone. Nathan, however, became visibly distracted. When I got up to use the bathroom, I returned to find him standing on the scale, looking nervous as he tried to cover the numbers with his foot. The next morning, I woke up to an empty bed. Groggy and disoriented, I wandered out to see him returning, drenched in sweat. He had gone out for a morning run. That evening, after tidying up the house, he grabbed his gym bag and headed to the gym, not returning until well past midnight. This routine continued for several days, before I finally caught on and confronted him. "What have you been up to lately?" I asked one night while we were eating dinner. He was picking at his food, nibbling at it half-heartedly. For the first time, I truly understood how frustrated he must have felt watching me skip meals in the past. Seeing him so pitifully restrain himself from eating made my heart ache. He shot me a side glance, his tone slightly accusatory. "All I have left is my body to attract you. You called me fat, and now you won't let me control my weight and stay fit?" I let out a soft chuckle. "Are you feeling insecure?" He didn't respond, but his lips began to turn downward, a clear sign that he was feeling hurt. Feigning nonchalance, I gave him a sly smile and pulled a small ring box from my bag, sliding it across the table toward him. "How about this? Will marrying me give you some sense of security?" My Nathan is, without a doubt, a big crybaby. During the proposal I had carefully planned, he wore the white suit I had specifically requested for the occasion, paired with a black shirt and a perfectly styled slicked-back hairstyle. But there he was, burying his face in my white cocktail dress, crying his heart out. We were at a public restaurant, so at least he managed not to sob loudly. Instead, tears silently streamed down his face, interrupted only by occasional sniffles. His warmth soaked through my dress, and I worried he might dehydrate himself from all the crying. I hurried to comfort him. "Don't you want to put on the ring? Is it because you don't like the design? If you don't, I'll take you to pick one you like better." He immediately looked up, his face a tear-streaked mess, and snatched the ring from the box. His brows furrowed as he declared, his voice shaky with emotion, "No, I want this one. What you gave me is mine, I'm not changing it." I held out my hand and said softly, "Wipe your tears and put the ring on me." With trembling hands, he delicately slipped the ring onto my finger, his eyes still glossy with tears. Then, he raised my hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "I love you, my Eva," he whispered,